Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Talk Kashrus, presented by the Kashrus Awareness Project in conjunction with the Chicago Rabbinical Council. Today I am joined by Rabbi Sholem Fishbane, Kashrus Administrator of the CRC and the Executive Director of ACO. Thank you, Rabbi Fishbane, for joining us. Today we'd like to discuss a topic that many youngsters may be interested or surprised or dismayed that we're discussing. Parents, I'm sure, will be very excited about it, and that is e-cigarettes, electronic cigarettes, and the kashrus questions related to e-cigarettes. And I would put out a disclaimer before we get into the kashrus conversation as relates to e-cigarettes that, obviously there are health concerns with smoking, whether it's tobacco, regular cigarettes, or electronic cigarettes, and by no means, by having this conversation, are we condoning using these cigarettes. I know that the Paiskim in Lakewood put out a very pointed letter warning people about the dangers of smoking al pi hayras, Hagadolim, previous generations, and they feel that the same concerns that apply to regular cigarettes apply to electronic cigarettes and things of that sort. So just as a disclaimer, we're not condoning its usage, but at the same time, because they are quite prevalent, it's important that we discuss the kashrus concerns that there may or may not be when it comes to electronic cigarettes. Anything you want to comment on that before we get into the topic?
I fully agree. It's completely usher, and it's so interesting that so many people call anyway. I don't smoke myself or vape or whatever it is, and it's 100% correct. And I even talking about it is it's uncomfortable. But I've learned in the industry is that we recently went through Purim. So on Purim there's we all know the story of Purim, how the Yidden were punished from going to the Sudas HaChashverosh. Mordechai said, "Don't go to Sudas HaChashverosh," and they didn't listen. But Chazal say, once they went, you know who actually went with them? Mordechai HaTzadik. Because he says, if they're going, I might as well make sure that the yayin that they drink is not yayin nesech, right? So he wanted to take away the michshol of kashrus. So perhaps, these types of things, they're doing it anyway. Let me at least go through the kashrus side of it with the understanding that it continues, like you said earlier correctly, that it's usher to smoke. So I've been doing some research on it only because so many people have been calling, and it's really a sheer by itself. There's what is called achila, right? The Ramah says that it's usher to be toying something even if you don't swallow it completely, and the Mefarshim explain as long as it goes into the glycerin, into the throat, that's what's called achila. So therefore, the mitzias is that there's a regular cigarette is something called reicha. This is not the sugi of reicha, which is a whole geschmack thing by itself. This is a sugi called zeya. And zeya, anything that comes from zeya is considered like it itself. It's the liquid coming off that is connected. It's different than reicha, which is smoke. Okay? So therefore, what we have over here is the way e-cigarettes work is there's a liquid, and there's an electronic piece in there that when you suck on it, I guess it converts the liquid into vape. And that goes to the back of the throat, where it's called, you get the hit, I'm told, by the people that smoke. And that the vape converts to liquid droplets. So that's shtia, according to the vast majority of Paiskim. We have a legitimate case of drinking something, whatever's in that cartilage. I did see a tshuva from Rabbi Weissmandel, who felt that that's not called te'ima. Ayin Sham in his tshuva, why is it, but most poskim say that's called te'ima. Okay? So now that we've established that that's te'ima in the back of it, that's called te'ima in the glycerin, now we got to see what's in it. So there's really 4 or 5 things that go on in an e-cig. I've been in factories that make it. There's a factory in Florida owned by a Frum Yid, and I got a very good understanding by studying what they do over there. There's the flavor, which is a smaller amount. There's the propylene glycol, which is about 30%. There's nicotine, and then there's the glycerin. So the flavors are the flavors. For the sake of our purposes, we're not really worried about the cautious of the flavors, making it a point that you can't eat it because of flavor. It's not like soda where you're gonna. It's different. Okay, so let's put the flavors down. We're not so worried about those. Propylene glycol at a high percentage is actually something that's called davar mar. It's a pugum. It's about 20%, 30%, whatever it is. The nicotine itself, interesting. That itself is bitter. It's not good. It's so maybe there's nothing to worry about. It's ein roy lachila. So let's forget. Nice meeting, Rabbi Yitzchak. So let's go on. So the question of halacha is the word called achshavei. Achshavei means if you have something that you wouldn't normally eat because it's pogum, it's ich, right? And you drink it or eat it anyway, you were machshavit. So that's the question in Isigs of this thing called achshavei. But the main concern in an Isig is the glycerin. That's the main concern. Because glycerin can be made from two things, from a plant or from a cow. Okay? Not a kosher cow. It can be made from fat. It's a fat. What is glycerin? It's a sweet, fatty syrup. Okay? And they put it in everything to make it, right? They put it in medicines, they'll put it in cookies, they'll put it in, glycerin is huge. And if you understand that, so therefore, we're talking about, let's just go back for a minute. We're talking about achila, something that you put in your mouth because you want it, and it's a suffix iser daraisa. It might come from a behema that wasn't shechted, which is no different than eating a hamburger, right? So now we have a real shiloh. What do you do by a suffix iser daraisa? Usually you're machmer. So I went through many, many ways of understanding how they make it and what it is. I came up with actually 14 different ways of the shiloh of how they can make an isig, okay? So the first thing I understood is actually there's a difference between the throwaway isig and the cartilage. A throwaway has a higher percentage of propylene glycol, so the glycerin level is a little lower. Maybe you don't even have majority, okay? The second is if there's nicotine. We talked about the nicotine being pugum. The third is that sometimes on the labels say vegetable glycerin. If it says vegetable glycerin, can you trust it? That's a sugya by itself.
Right.
It related in other parts of Kaz. The fact that it says something on there, do companies actually change the label every time something else comes in?
Right.
Not so simple. Okay. Then the big thing, and here's the main sugya. Where was it made? Was it made in the United States or was it made overseas? Why is that such a big difference? Because the majority, the vast majority of glycerin in the United States today is indeed vegetable glycerin. And therefore in halacha it's called the parish meruba parish. You go basar rife overseas, especially in Brazil, maybe in China, these other countries, forget it. But the stuff made here, and I studied the glycerin market very carefully, and therefore it is. Therefore, if it says made in America, maybe you can go basarai that it's vegetable glycerin.
I'm curious. Is there a price difference between animal glycerin and vegetable glycerin that would make it more likely that they'd use one over the other?
So great question, and really depends on the country. So in America today, the vegetable glycerin is lower than animal glycerin. For some reason, the pet industry still uses animal glycerin. It has to do with a quirk in the government laws, and some of the medicine industry, not necessarily in America, maybe in Canada, also has to do with the way the works with government laws. But for the purposes of what we're talking about, it's much easier and cheaper to buy your vegetable glycerin.
Is that enough halachically to rely on the fact that it's coming from vegetable?
So therefore, that's where it comes down to. What your question is exactly the bottom line. So I called around the Paiskim to find out. As I said, Rabbi Weissman wrote a whole tshuva based on Kol Parish. It's right. He says it's mutter, therefore. I spoke to Rabbi First, the Dayan of Agudas Yisrael of Illinois. I spoke to our Rosh Bezdin, Rabbi Rees from the CRC Bezdin. They said, no. You're talking Safek Daraisa, you're talking Achshavei, all because if you take each child by itself, it's not so simple. And they said, Aser. I spoke to Rabbi Sholem Miller. I spoke to Rabbi Heinemann, Shlita. And they agreed with the fact that it's considered Belia, it's considered Achila, and considered Zeya, but they also agreed that you go Basar Roiv. So if indeed, they said, if indeed this Metzias is a glycerin today in the United States is Roiv vegetable, there's what to be Saimachan, they said. Al Pi Halacha, again, not condoning smoking.
Right.
But so therefore, that's where we came out. But, but it's interesting, I mentioned before we had 14 things. So, like, the easiest way to be makel, so to say, is if it's a throwaway, it's vegetable says on the label, and it has nicotine, it's made in the United States. And the opposite would be the hardest way. But now there are some that actually have a hechsher.
Oh, there are?
There are, yeah. There's one that is given a hechsher by a similar sounding kosher agency to us. And we get angry calls by the mothers, how dare you give a hechsher on something like us? We can't get a word in edgewise because they're so mad. 2 minutes into the rant, we'll say, it's not us.
Not us.
It's not us. That happens, actually. But I'll tell you the bottom line is because, the truth is, if you just ask, I gave you the different shitas, but I can tell you something that I have heard many times from Rabbi Yisrael Belsky, Zechreinu Levracha, and Rabbi Schwartz, Zechreinu Levracha, and others that are, poiskim and kashrus. They say, when you give a hechsher as a agency, when you are in charge of giving out information, whether you're a hechsher or like we're doing here today, when you're an authority to tell people, you have to go with what's called shaila free. You tell the Klal Yisrael that this is, you don't go with b'di'evet, and whether it could be a Starbucks question like we've talked about in the past, it could be other types of shilas, shaila free. E-cigs is not shaila free. We're talking about Sveika Daraisa.
So it's an interesting thing. I just, sorry to interrupt, but it is interesting that we've seen letters coming out about e-cigarettes in regards to the health issue, but you would think that based on our conversation, you would think that someone would have put out a letter, Lahavi Yadua, the public should know that e-cigarettes is really not a simple matter when it comes to kashrus.
So actually, it's a great point, and I thank you for bringing that up. I want to quote a letter from Rabbi Moshe Sternbuch, Shlita, and I'll say it in Hebrew. Is that okay?
Yeah.
He says, Oidei Sigaria Electronia, Hineni Maskin Ledvar, someone asked him the question, Shekiven Sheyesh Besoiche Tamsis Sheyesh Bohem Tam Toiv, Shenisraf, V'nepach le'adim v'nichnosam l'toich, it turns into steam into your mouth. Umargish tam ha'adim b'piv. Kivan shezeya dinoi kemamish havi kitoyim b'piv es guf ha'choymim. Ulchein tzrichen li'shtamesh rak b'sagaria sheyesh elov hechsher. Very, very clear. Like there's no
ambiguity.
There's no ambiguity with that. So there are others in Israel. Moshe Sholem Klein, and others have also come out to say that it needs a hechsher. So, and they didn't even talk about the
health part of it.
It was straight up
kashrus.
Yeah, so.
As always, we've learned so much from this conversation. Then we look forward to hearing more if things do develop. And as like you always say, things are always changing. Yeah. People should stay up to date. If the way they produce it is different, or maybe even better yet, obviously people shouldn't smoke if they don't have to, but if people are, perhaps someone would take the initiative of making sure that the majority of the devices that are being used are under a reputable hashgacha. That would also be a tremendous service.
Not under CRC kosher.
No. You're getting enough phone calls.
No. It's so interesting. Why are we getting so many phone calls? Because everything else is easy. We put it on our website.
Right.
It's kosher, it's not kosher. because we hold you shouldn't be smoking.
So you don't
Put
have
it on, so
right.
people are calling.
Uh-huh.
It's like the hashgachas that we don't necessarily recommend. It's not on a recommended list.
Right.
Anyway, but that's
it makes it complicated.
Makes it complicated.
Makes it a complicated matter. But thank you again. Thank you for joining us.